This is the Nobel Podcast, where we talk about how to optimize your technology, life, and mind. We're joined by special operations veterans, entrepreneurs, investors, and others who have overcome difficulty to make it to the top of their craft by staying in the fight.
Welcome to the Nobel Podcast. So today we're going to have on Mia Link. We're trying to bring interesting stories of veterans and transitions and the life stories of that. So I think Mia is one of the more inspiring people in our company. Her resume to me looks fake. So introduce yourself and say what you do.
Hi, thank you for having me. Good to be here. So I'm Mia Link, VP of Strategy for Zero Eyes.
Awesome. So we'll get into it, but as an overarching thing, spent some time in the Air Force. How long?
Yeah, I was an Air Force intelligence officer for 10 years.
And previous to that, you were a professional athlete.
You could probably say that.
Okay, I will say that. So let's start in the beginning. Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in Jenkintown, Pennsylvania, right outside of Philadelphia. And I played sports from a young age. So I was kind of a shy kid, and sports were a really easy way for me to kind of come out of my shell and just go hard after something.
What were the first sports you got into?
I played soccer starting at about 6 years old. I watched my brother play soccer. My sister played field hockey and lacrosse. My brother ended up D1 in college. My sister was great in high school. She didn't end up playing in college, but I grew up watching her. And I had a cousin who went D1 to Georgetown. She was, All-American, Hall of Famer, that kind of thing. Very, very inspiring.
So how did you realize that you were either better at sports than maybe others, or you found that your sport? So you started with soccer. How did that evolve? Because it ended up being field hockey.
Yeah, so I went to one of the smallest public schools in Pennsylvania, and there were only two fall sports for girls, and it was field hockey or tennis. And I love running around on a field, so that was pretty easy. It was just natural to start with field hockey instead of playing intramural soccer. I think I took to it pretty naturally.
When did you, maybe in your mind, decide that it was possible that you could play Division I or in college or even star on your high school team, any of those things? When did that first come in your mind that this was a possibility?
I was, on the all-star team in 7th grade, so it wasn't like outstanding, but again, it came a little naturally. So I think it was both just having a natural affinity for sports, but also I really threw myself into it. And early on in high school, decided that I wanted to go to the Olympics. I lived across the street from the high school, so I'd just take my stick and ball out to the field or the tennis courts and just hit it to myself over and over again, like all summer. And I just really kind of unwound that way. I have a kind of obsessive personality, so I decided that I loved field hockey and I wanted to go after it. I started doing things like futures, field hockey, and just getting into some of the club stuff. In high school, I joined a club. We were called Mystics, and then that turned into Excalibur. But I met some of my best friends that way because we all shared a love of the game. And we also started doing things like camps together. And at some point, you can get into tournaments where they select you for a higher level that'll lead to, the under 16, under 19, under 21 national team. I never made any type of national team when I was in high school, but I narrowed down some of the colleges that I was looking at to around 4. And I really just wanted somewhere with a good hockey program and good academics. I was also pretty driven in school as well to do well. And I started doing camps at each of those schools, and I met the coach at the University of Virginia, Jess Wilk, and I just decided that I wanted to play for her. And I just loved what she was about. She was still actually playing on the women's lacrosse national team, which I thought was pretty cool as well.
What was your experience like at UVA?
When I got to my first preseason, I felt like it was such a different level that I might as well have never played field hockey before. I felt like I was just so far out of my league, especially in some of the drills, that it was really intimidating. And so that was a really big transition that I had to figure out. And luckily preseason was long enough. So I became a starter right away, which was really neat and exciting.
Your freshman year.
Yes.
You were a starter.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. And that was unexpected. Again, like I just had this incredible coach, and I think she really believed in me, and she knew how hard I was trying.
So how did your college career go?
I think UVA had been consistently ranked top 12, top 10 in the country. And then when I got there, we had a lot of turnover. We just had a tough time bringing everything together. We might have been in last place in the ACC for a while. There were only 4 or 5 teams in the conference at the time, and the other teams were really strong. So it was a little bit demoralizing and a bit hard. Not what I had wanted when I chose the school. But again, like there are just all sorts of challenges that come up that you don't realize is what you're signing up for.
So as you progress your career, one of the funny things in our office is, on Kieran's door, he actually has a picture of Faces in the Crowd from Sports Illustrated that you were in. And when I was a kid, the first place I would look in a Sports Illustrated was Faces in the Crowd. And I always wanted to get in one, and I never did. But we have a picture of you in Faces in the Crowd, and I think it's from your senior year.
I was an All-American at some level at some point, second team maybe, all conference. And I was selected for the under-21 national team and got to participate in the Pan American Games, which were in the spring, and we came in second, which meant we qualified for the Junior World Cup that following fall. That was really exciting. I scored a goal against Chile, who was a good team. I think that was the team we beat to get into the Junior World Cup. It was just an incredible experience. I got to wear the USA jersey, even if it was just the junior team. And one of my UVA teammates was the goalie as well, so we got to do that together, which was awesome.
So you get to represent the U.S., which is incredible. You're a star in college. I mean, how did your college career end, and how did you continue?
My final year, we ended up with a new coach. And new coach brought in a couple Dutch girls, which was a really value add to our team. And they were just incredible players, Inga and Fenna. And that really helped kind of turn around the dynamics on the team. Just having some extra foundation there. And we made the NCAA tournament for the first time in my career. We got to the Elite Eight. And then we lost by a goal in the last couple seconds. A devastating loss, but a really, really great experience. Really fun to be there. So I feel fortunate for that experience. I had a hard time accepting that would be the end of my career. So
but it wasn't.
It was not the end of my career. Through college, I studied biomedical engineering, and I was trying to figure out my next steps with that. I applied to a couple different grad schools for my PhD. I got accepted to Drexel with a fellowship offer, and I just had this pit in my stomach thinking about going through with that. And I was talking to my coach, and she suggested that I head over to the Netherlands and play in some of the leagues over there. And I was just elated by that possibility. She had hired an assistant coach from Australia who had coached someone who was known as the best player in the world, Alison Annan, hands down. She was this incredible gold medalist for Australia, and she was a coach over there. So they got me a tryout over in the Netherlands. I spent the summer kind of coaching camps and training, and I flew over there for the start of their training in August after I graduated. And that was a wake-up call.
So it was a wake-up call, but did you make it?
Yeah, so I got over there. I didn't really realize what I was signing up for or getting myself into. They speak Dutch over there. That was That was one
They
thing.
do.
Most of them speak English, so there wasn't too much trouble, except that when they're speaking to each other, they just speak Dutch. And then it's really hard to not feel left out. And then also, they are just really strong field hockey players. I went to this tryout, and the coach pulled me aside after about a week and told me that he was going to have me on the team. And I was like, great. I actually didn't even realize that it was close. And I was like, all right, ready for the season. The first game I had to sit out because of the eligibility requirements. I didn't make the list in time, something like that. And I was ready to play the next game, and I did not play in the next game. And I just continued to sit the bench a lot. If I thought I was over my head starting college, like I guess it was a similar feeling in the Netherlands. I didn't have that coach who believed in me, who was going to give me the chance on the field to prove myself. I had a tough year. I did a lot of practicing. Obviously, I was on the practice squad and tried to put in a lot of work that way. I put myself through that year being an au pair with a family that was affiliated with the club. I definitely learned a lot through the practice and through the experience that I'd never really had before of sitting on the bench. But I decided to go back to the Netherlands and play on a different team. And so I tried out for another team who was not in the what you would call the Premier League. They were in that second league. And they had just dropped out of the Premier League and were trying to get back into it. I joined that team along with an Australian. That was a really great fit for me. I was a starter. I was the leading scorer for that team. And it ended up being a really exciting season. And we had playoffs at the end of the season where we were trying to get back into that Premier League. We were playing another team for it, the other top team in the league. And we ended up winning 3-2 in overtime, sudden death. And it was just like this incredible moment of winning and, you know, rushing the field and getting a trophy. And I was all set to come back and play the next year with them in the Premier League. But I went home for the summer, tried out for the national team again. And this time the coach told me that he wanted me out in California training with the national team full time for the following year. And that's what I wanted all along. Right. So I had to back out of my commitment to the Dutch club team, and I moved out to California for the year. We would train 1 to 3 times a day, 5 days a week. And it was hard, mostly in that it was so much training and so little actual competition.
Right.
That is hard to get through. It wasn't until, I want to say, the following spring that we had our first friendlies against a couple teams. We had Argentina, the Netherlands, and South Korea come out for a friendly series, which was cool because there were a couple people that I'd played with or against in the Netherlands. Actually, I'd played against almost all of them. Right. But one that I played with my first year out there who was on the team now, and I got to play against them, and I think I got a little mentally in my head, and I did not have a great game against them. But it was fun. I felt really proud to, be sporting that USA jersey and play against them. Played well against Argentina and South Korea, and it was just a really great experience. Got my first international caps.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So you ended up going from there into the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
How much longer did that go on?
So I was in California for a year. Towards the end, after that series that I just mentioned, I actually tore a ligament in my hand. Okay. And I went down for a tackle hard. I felt something pop. I thought, oh, that sucks. And I just tried to play through it for a couple months. Really impacted my ability to hit the ball. I really didn't see a trainer until the summertime. She told me, yeah, you should go see a doctor. I got an MRI, showed it was torn, and I had to have surgery. I had been starting to feel a little lost anyway by the end of that year. My whole life, I wanted to be on the national team. after the friendlies, we had a World Cup qualifier tournament where I only made alternate. So I wasn't on the field. I wasn't named as one of the 16 players that could be in that tournament. And I was disappointed, obviously. Again, I wanted that chance to prove myself in the games where I'm better. I'm better in a game than in practice. I don't do drills very well. Still look like I can't hold a stick or hit a ball. I really started feeling like I need more out of my life. I'm playing a game. It's really cool to be able to represent my country, but like, what is the point of a sport? And I actually met somebody who was an officer in the Army who suggested that I become a military officer. And I was like, nah, that's not for me. I've never, like, I don't know anybody in the military. I've never even considered it. That's not for me. But this is going to sound incredibly lame. But when I was recovering from my surgery, this was pre, Hulu or Netflix. I don't know, maybe Netflix was around, but I didn't have it. And I sat on the couch watching NCIS reruns. And I was like, oh, well, that looks pretty cool. Maybe I should do something like that. I wonder if the military would be the right way to go. I ended up with like a connection to a connection to a connection, getting introduced to this former Air Force intelligence officer who just loved to stay in the community. He was still in the intelligence community and kind of mentored me into actually applying and getting accepted and commissioning through OTS in the Air Force. And that was a long process. It was almost 2 years from when I made the decision to go into the military to when I actually got to OTS. Playing hockey for the U.S. was incredible, and I felt super proud, but now I felt like I had just so much more meaning behind, like, the Air Force uniform that I was wearing, that I really believed in.
So how long were you in the Air Force for?
10 years.
10 years. So tell me about that career progression, some of the stuff that you learned, the wickets and kind of meaningful moments. Let's go for that.
When I told you I have an obsessive personality, like, I just drank the Kool-Aid right away. I'll also say, if we're talking meaningful moments, I met my husband 2 nights before OTS even started. We were in the same class together. We sat next to each other at a restaurant one night and shared a pizza. And he'd been in the military for 10 years. I was just going into the military, and we're the same age. And just that, like, difference in experience was massive. Like, I wouldn't trade the experience that I got, but it was pretty cool to see how well he was just able to navigate OTS and help everybody else who had no idea what they were doing, like me. So after officer training school, I went off to San Angelo, Texas for intelligence training school. And from there, I got my first assignment to England. And I was initially sent to the OSS and the Operational Support Squadron. And from there, they kind of farm you out to the different units on base. So there were a couple different fighter units, and there was a rescue squadron. And I wanted to go to the rescue squadron. I went to SEER school, and I didn't have to do that as an intelligence officer, but I wanted to get that experience. It was one of the most unique experiences of my life. And, if you think you learn a lot about yourself in tough times through, like, preseason camps and stuff like that, where you're pushing your body physically, I learned so much more.
So SEER school is basically being captured as a POW and how to counter that, right? That's the idea of it. Mm-hmm. And there's kind of a little poking at what torture is like, a little poke at it. And sleep deprivation, food deprivation, mm-hmm. bad sounds, mental struggle in it on purpose.
Yeah. So, I don't want to get too much into it here.
No, but like, what's the takeaway? So you have this experience that's supposed to be hard. It is supposed to be mentally, physically, emotionally challenging. They do things to you to touch it. I don't know that it goes to cruel, but it's just short of that, probably.
Yeah. My favorite part was the survival part, where they take you out to the mountain and you've got a couple days where you don't have nearly enough food, and you've got to make makeshift tents with your tarp, and they teach you a ton of different skills for different environments. And again, you're not sleeping, you're hiking and rucking all through the mountain.
So you enjoyed it. Like when you were done with it, were you like, that was pretty cool? Or
yes.
you're like, thank God that's over.
Yes, I ate an entire pizza and thought, wow, that was great, but it feels great to be back in my hotel room.
Right. What are some significant points of your military career where 10 years is a long time? That means you had to say yes more than once.
I only deployed once, and it was with the rescue squadron from England to Iraq in support of Operation Inherent Resolve. I took that really seriously. So I actually never left the base. I'm an intelligence officer. My role is different, but my job was to give the intelligence to the pilots to keep them safe and make sure they came home every night. I wanted to go out there with them. My commander wouldn't let me. I really believed in what they were doing. I believed in what we were doing out there. And I would have stayed longer if I could have. I would have gone back if I could have. But shortly after we got back from that deployment, I got my next assignment to be joint spouse with my husband, and we went to El Paso, Texas. He had a unique job, which kind of limited the bases that he could be assigned to, which had an impact for where I could be assigned to, obviously. Right. So I was at Joint Task Force North at Fort Bliss in El Paso, supporting the counter-drug mission along the southwest border, which we didn't have a lot of resources to do much about what was going on. And we had a lot of limitations because we couldn't collect anything that might have a U.S. person's information, which was really anything along the border would have a risk of that. So in an intelligence capacity, we really had our hands tied behind our backs. We were trying to target the cartels farther south and build out that network diagram of the various cartels in Mexico and South.
So that's pretty interesting. I don't think that people know that we do that.
No, you're probably right.
Right. So what was that mission set like, knowing that when you read about it, it's pretty devastating and it's probably more violent than people are aware of?
Yes.
So what was that, looking at that kind of organization that, for whatever reason, it is close to us and does affect the United States of America, but typically like the murdering and stuff is probably south of the border. And,
yes.
Whatever. What did you learn? What was any takeaway from that?
Well, I just thought it was interesting that cartels really don't want to commit any violence against Americans or really draw any attention from the U.S. government or law enforcement entities because they didn't want us cracking down. There was a deliberate effort to not murder anybody.
Because if the U.S. decides to fight them, they're not winning that fight?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's interesting. Did you find that rewarding?
I would not say that. It was more frustrating than rewarding.
Because you can't do anything.
Because I can't do anything. There are limited resources along the southwest border, and of course, rightly so. They're in more operational war zones. We have limited resources, and they go where they're needed most. We're prioritizing them. It was frustrating to have a job and not really be able to do it 100%. From El Paso, we then got orders to Las Vegas. Las Vegas was not on our list of places that we wanted to be stationed. And at that point, I was 30 weeks pregnant with my first kid when we moved up to Vegas. Couldn't really enjoy Vegas for what it is at the time either. Although we took advantage for those couple months that we had, saw a lot of shows. I was actually in a Blue Man Group show while I was in labor. I knew my contractions were starting. We went to the show because, it can be a long time. And it was right.
I think I'm having a baby. You know what? I've heard great reviews. You need to see this. I hear that it's wonderful. And so you went ahead and went with it.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, we went.
Okay.
And we had time. We knew we'd leave the show if we had to, and we didn't have to leave the show.
Describe that decision-making in the process of why you got out of the military.
Yeah. So once I had kids, I was not as prepared to deploy. And again, like I'd had a great experience on my first deployment. I wanted to deploy from El Paso. It just didn't work out. I really wanted to do the analysis, do the intelligence, do everything. And I started out in a training unit, and then I went to group staff, and you're doing a lot of just kind of project management, and you don't really feel like you have your hands in anything and you're making a difference anywhere. Sometimes. That's how I felt. And so with the kids not wanting to deploy to do at my actual job, we started thinking about what would it look like to get out. And Zach was coming up on 20 years. So we, talked about where we wanted to go. And right around then, the pandemic hit. And I found out that I was pregnant with my second the day everything shut down. And that made it pretty clear that we wanted to go back where we had some family support, and my hometown was the easy answer. So we were looking at houses, put in a couple offers, found a house, had my parents go visit it, and we put an offer in, and it was accepted, and it was like, I guess we're going to get out now. That was actually kind of what drove the decision. It was still like 9 months before we could start a skill bridge. So I started putting in some effort to look at companies that I could do a skill bridge with, mostly in the area. I found one called Zero Eyes that looked like it had a really interesting and cool mission. Submitted my resume, had a brief call, but I was like, man, I have no idea what I could offer this company. Like, I wish I had computer skills or AI skills or IT or something.
So, as we were looking at you, we see someone who's a professional athlete, veteran, because we care about that, the veteran thing. Transitioning, you were going to go try to get your PhD. So you're someone who's smart, who went to a great school, who's a professional athlete, who was an officer in the military, who's worked all these different mission sets and intelligence. And subsequently, we put you on our strategy team. So what are some of the things that you've gotten to do in the company that you didn't think you'd have an opportunity to before? Because I can think of some extraordinary things.
I'm on, I guess, what you would call multifunctional projects where you've got to get input from all different departments, like our Safety Act designation application and FedRAMP efforts. And then we've got some government relations efforts where I'm working with lobbyists and briefing lawmakers. And like I had some briefing experience from my Intel days, and I was fortunate to get some constructive criticism and feedback throughout all of my briefings while I was deployed from my commander, who was a weapons officer, and they take briefing really seriously. I've briefed a lot of state representatives and senators, and I've participated in committee hearings for some of those states where I testified in support of certain legislation. I was able to share a little bit about Zero Eyes and answer questions that any lawmaker might have.
Do you ever sit in front of those, because you're literally on like house floors and stuff like that? You sit there at a brief with a microphone where you have people on a bench who are in front of you. Do you ever think, what am I doing here?
Yes. Yes. Exactly that.
How surreal is that? How do you face that? Because it is designed to be intimidating. And sometimes they're not nice about it on purpose.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had any negative experiences like that. Zero Eyes is really at the cutting edge of a lot of like video analytics legislation and stuff. So I look at it as more of an informational briefing. Like I get to educate people on what we do and how we work and the value that we can bring, the good that we can do. And because Zero Eyes is something that I really believe in, it's almost easy to get up there and talk about that. Just talking about the mission. When I got out of the military, I was really looking for something that I could do that mattered. Again, it's a mission that I really believe in, and a culture that's just so unique, and really everybody has the same feeling, I think.
Are there any takeaways from that process, the difficulty or thing that you've learned that other people could learn, do you think?
Oh, I hope everybody's able to take advantage of a skill bridge. I didn't realize how stressful it would be to get out. You know, you're moving across the country. You've got kids and responsibilities and expenses, and you don't know what your salary is going to be. Like, what would the equivalent, what could I earn getting out of the military? You know, like, I'm not going to be an intelligence officer anymore. There's no one-to-one equivalent. So just trying to figure out your value, what you're willing to trade for a job that you believe in. If you can't have both, a job that has some flexibility for you to be able to take care of the family and find that balance, that is a hard thing to do. So having a skill bridge where you can not only just get introduced to another company, like a civilian company, and kind of see what is out there, what you can do, but also, like, if you get to that skill bridge, you know, theoretically a different company besides Zero Eyes, and you don't like it, you still have some time to start to apply to other jobs, and it's a buffer for sure.
And we've made it a family affair now. So Zach Skillbridge on my team and Zach is on my team. Basically, a Skillbridge is an internship out of the military while you're still active duty during the time that you're about to get out. They call that, you know, your terminal leave or whatever it is till you finish your time. So the ability to do that transition and have a good look at something that could be a job.
I will say that, like, even if it's really hard to figure out what your one-to-one civilian counterpart job is going to be, the military just brings a very unique experience, and it can show that you are competent and you can do a job that maybe isn't exactly what you used to do, but just I think it's important to have confidence in your ability to just find a job and be able to do it.
Give me 3 to 5 movies that either you think are fantastic or change your way of thinking or influence your life, inspired you, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be all at once, but 3 to 5 movies that have an impact on you. First,
I'll have to say It's a Wonderful Life. It's a movie we used to watch every Christmas as a family.
Are you aware that Jimmy Stewart made that after World War II, and that was his first movie back, and dealing with post-traumatic stress?
I don't think I was.
So that was the first movie. He didn't think that he'd be able to make it back in Hollywood. He had just worked. That was literally his first job back. And he's like, I'm a sham. I'm not an actor anymore. And I think a lot of that movie is like his transition, which I think makes the movie cooler.
Yeah. So $1 Million Baby was another one.
That's the boxing.
Yes. Right. With Hilary Swank. And
Clint Eastwood. Right.
Yep. Again, I loved that tunnel vision, obsessive, just totally driven athlete story. And of course it has a horrendously sad ending. Yeah. Right. A Miracle on Ice. Like, I love that story.
Okay.
All those inspiring USA sports stories.
Let's say a book or TV show. What are a couple that really impacted your life?
Favorite book would have to be Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand.
Okay. And
TV show. Man, I love Ted Lasso.
It's good. Ted Lasso is good. That's a family favorite as well. It's very positive.
Yes.
Okay. What is the best piece of advice that you've ever been given?
Oh, man.
Is there any? You've talked about a bunch of coaches and mentors that you've had that were really important. Is there anything even silly that was advice that had lasting effect on you?
So when I was in Erbil, the unit before us had set up the camp, and they were there for 4 months. And then we got there right at the start of the summer. Erbil is in the desert. It got quite hot there, 110 degrees in the summer. And we had generators to give us air conditioning in our tents that just constantly failed. So our pilots were supposed to be sleeping during the day so that they could go out during the night missions to be kind of on call for any incident that might happen where they would be needed. So what happened was these generators were dying and they couldn't sleep. And so our commander made decisions to not send them out on the birds because it was dangerous. And he made these decisions that had implications across the entire operational area and meant that other missions couldn't take place. And he was getting, generals being like, who the hell is this guy? Why are we not getting the rescue helicopters? And he took a lot of flack for that. But you know what? We got generators and they worked. And then we didn't have any issues after that. He made hard decisions and took on a lot of negative energy to do the right thing for his team. And he told me in some of those emails that are going back and forth, where everybody's yelling and just kind of sounding like a jerk, he told me to just always tell the truth and always be nice. So everything in his email was just completely factual and very polite. It doesn't benefit you to go back and let yourself get caught up in the drama and get all hot and yell back or anything, but just stay professional, stay factual, and stay nice. So I like that advice.
I need to learn that advice. Nobody ever gave that to me. May the bridges I burn light the way. All right. Well, I think we'll end it there. I think that we're fortunate to have you. Mia, thank you for sitting down and sharing some of your story. Thank you for the work that you do for us, and thank you for making a family affair. That's it.
Well, thank you.
That's it for this episode. If you want to check out more from the podcast, head to zeroeyes.com/Nobel, where you can see show notes, read more about our guests, and suggest guests or topics of your own. Until next time, stay in the fight. Don't ring the bell.